Oh, yeah,
Okay.
the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. So, hi everyone. Today I'm going to present my dissertation. The topic is label efficient machine learning for construction robotics. So, first, I want to thank my advisor, Professor Chen Feng. So, he gave me a lot of guidance during the 4 years about how to become a real researcher. And I also want to thank other thesis committee members, Professor Samiha, Professor Masood, and Professor Wenjun. So thank you for your help for me to finish my dissertation. And I also want to thank all the team members in the AI First Lab. So you gave me a lot of support. So I really appreciate. So I want to briefly introduce myself. So my education experience has been introduced by Professor Samiha, and I have 2 working experiences. So the most recent one was in 2020. I worked as a computer vision and machine learning research intern. So another one was in 2017. I worked as a computer vision and aerial robotics engineer intern at Precision Silver. I also have 2 teaching experiences. So the first one is robot perception. It's a graduate level class. And another one is robot vision, which is a undergraduate level class. So my interest in robotics starts from my childhood because my father is an electric worker. So I saw him working with these the wires and construct those utilities, electric utilities. I thought it is very dangerous. So I think if one day robots can help humans to do those dangerous works. So now the dream from my childhood becomes my research goal today. So I want to build the eyes and brains for the robots to improve the safety and the efficiency for the work of human beings. So here are my publications. Today, I'm going to introduce the 3 of them. So these works are included in my dissertation. The right animations shows a preview of these works. So here is the structure of today's presentation. In the first section, I will give some background information. First, I will introduce the history of construction machinery, and then I will discuss about the drivers and drawbacks of construction robotics. And those can be related to machine learning. It's my focus of my dissertation. And also I will introduce the motivation for this dissertation. The next 3 sections are the 3 label efficient approaches proposed in this dissertation, including automatic data annotation, constraint-based weak supervision, and geometry-based label reduction. Finally, I will give a conclusion. First, I will review this dissertation in a big picture, and then I will discuss about the limitations of this work and some future directions. So the history for humankind using tools for construction dates back to the New Stone Age. At that time, some primitive tools were invented. Although those tools are very simple, but they include almost all the necessary functions, such as cutting, scraping, and pounding. Until the wheel were invented, people can transport heavy materials more easily. So the bottom picture shows a wheel that is invented in the 1300 BC, and it is discovered at I think it's discovered at the Great Britain. So until the ancient Rome, some human-powered machine were invented, such as the treadwheel crane. So the treadwheel crane, it is used until the Middle Age. So in the drawing in the 13th century, we can still see this kind of machine. So this machine used the human power to pedal on the wheels and lift the heavy objects. In the 19th centuries, the self-powered machines are widely used. The first self-powered excavator was invented in 1835. So in the early 20th centuries, the first commercial vehicles with tracks was invented. And after that, the construction machinery with tracks are widely used. So that improves the mobility of the construction machinery a lot because the tracks can adaptive to many kinds of terrains. And nowadays, we have many kinds of automated construction machinery, such as excavator, tower crane, mobile crane, etc. And with the development of AI technologies, we can imagine that in the future, we will have more intelligent machineries. And we also can call them construction robotics. So maybe in the future, the human do not need to control the robotics and they can do the work by themselves. So we can see that the human plays less and less role in the construction machinery, but the automation and intelligence is a trend for the future. So after talking about the historical perspective, we can also see the drivers of construction robotics from the current point of view. So from many researchers, we can see that construction robotics can improve the safety, speed, and precision in the construction process. And from a sustainability point of view, we can see some statistics shows that there's a trend in decreasing the number of workers and also the increasing trend in the average age of construction workers. So that tells us the construction robotics is in an urgent need. So as we have talked about, the intelligence is a trend in construction robotics nowadays, then it is inevitable to talk about machine learning robotics because machine learning is a very important tool to achieve intelligence. So we have seen many successful cases for machine learning robotics, such as robot grasping. This may include object detection for those robot arms and also reinforcement for control the robot arms. And also for autonomous driving, this may include the instant segmentation on images and object detection. Also for scene understanding, this is often done on 3D datasets such as point cloud. So scene understanding basically decomposes the point cloud or the 3D shape into a set of small segments, and each segment usually is an object instance. And this is also very useful in robotics. Also, the localization. Traditionally, we use SLAM-based approaches for robot localization, but in recent years, there are also many researchers on learning-based localization, and that is a very new trend in the machine learning in robotics. So most of these approaches depends on large-scale manually annotated datasets. For example, the S3DIS dataset, the ScanNet dataset, and semantic KT dataset. They are all 3D datasets that in a very large scale and manually labeled. The S3DIS dataset and ScanNet dataset are indoor point cloud dataset, and the semantic KT dataset is a outdoor point cloud dataset. So for example, in the S3DIS dataset, each single room may contain millions of points, and those points are manually labeled, which means manual labeling of these large-scale annotated dataset is at a very high cost. So as we have seen that robotics can improve the construction industry, but it is inevitable to face the drawbacks that brings by the machine learning in robotics, since machine learning plays a very important role in robotics. So these may include some unique difficulties to apply machine learning in civil engineering domain. The first reason is there is a huge amount of data and a high variety of data in civil engineering. First, as we have seen that room scale data may contain millions of points per room. In civil engineering, we may even use the building scale data or city scale data to do some tasks. This will cause a very high amount of data annotation burden. Also, in civil engineering, we sometimes need to do 4D analysis. Then, in addition to do a 3D annotation, you also need to annotate data at different times, so that this adds another burden to the data annotation. And also, the buildings are dissimilar across many factors, such as the topology, the regulations, the culture. It is not like in other industries, the products are easy to be standardized. Buildings are very different from each other. So this also adds a burden to the data annotation. Finally is the dynamic environment conditions adds the burden to the data annotation, because in other industry, it is mostly in a controlled environment in the factory, but the building site, usually it is an open site, so that the environment is changing. That will cost a lot of extra effort on labeling the data. And another aspect is the high cost of data acquisition. The first aspect is the robot platform itself is very expensive. And the second is the high quality lidar scanners or the GPS sensors you used for the civil engineering purposes is very expensive. The high quality lidar scanner, such as the terrestrial lidar scanner, the TLS, is much more expensive than the general purpose 3D scanner for computer vision, like the Kinect camera. And the survey grade GPS sensors is much more expensive than the off-the-shelf GPS sensors. So the high cost of this equipment means that you cannot always use this equipment so often, because the cost is very high, which limit the scale of the data. You cannot easily to scale up the data set you collect. Another cost is the high cost to create new profession and work groups. The first reason is you need to train people to operate those devices I mentioned. And another cost is for the data annotation, the data annotators needed to have some expertise in civil engineering. In those common computer vision tasks, the ordinary annotators, they just need to use their common knowledge to distinguish between like cats and dogs, those common objects. But if you want the data annotator to annotate the data for civil engineering, they may need to know what is partition wall and what is structural wall, so that you may need extra cost to train the data annotators. So that is the drawbacks for construction robotics related to machine learning that prevent the further application of construction robotics. So the motivation of this dissertation is to propose label-efficient machine learning approaches that can improve the further application to construction robotics and alleviate those drawbacks. The first approach we propose is automatic data annotation. So for some of the tasks, we may not need the human annotator, and we can design a system that can simultaneously collect the input signal and output ground truth information. And then the automatic data annotation is achieved so that all the data are automatically collected and annotated. So for some tasks, you cannot do automatic data annotation. Not all the ground truth information can be automatically annotated. Then we can think of to convert the ground truth information to the constraint become ground truth. And we use the constraint as a supervision signal instead of directly using the ground truth. And if the constraint can be automatically collected, we convert the problem to an automatic data annotation problem. So therefore, we can make another set of problem become label efficient. And these two types of problems do not directly reduce the number of labels you need. They just make the annotation become faster. Then the third type of approach directly reduce the need for manual labeling, and that's related to the cost I mentioned above that the equipment cost is very high. although you can make the the data annotation very efficient, collecting the data itself may have high cost to use these equipments. And in our geometry-based label reduction, we do not only improve the labeling efficiency, but also we can use a small amount of data to achieve a good performance so that it reduces the cost of using the high cost equipment for data collection. So let's first look into the first approach, automatic data annotation. So as I said, if the input and the ground truth output can be automatically collected and annotated, we can use this type of approach. The example application we show here is soft robot proprioception. So first, you may not be familiar with proprioception. From the definition of physiology, the proprioception is a sense through which we perceive the position and the movement of our body. So for example, if you raise your hand and you close your eyes, you can also feel that where your hand is. So this is the property of our body. We can proprioception ourselves. And for robot, it's the same. The robot needs to estimate the shape and the configuration of itself using some self-observing sensors. It is very useful for the robot to interact with the environment, and also the proprioception can provide a feedback for doing closed loop control. And there are some challenges on soft robot proprioception. For rigid robot, we have a DH convention that can use to represent the configuration of the rigid robot with a finite number of parameters. However, for soft robot, the degree of freedom is infinite. Then it is very hard to find a set of finite number of parameters to represent the 3D configuration. Then deep learning may be a tool to solve this problem because we know that neural network has a universal approximation ability. So the soft robot proprioception have some application in construction robotics, and that's a relationship with the topic. For example, if we want the robot to grab some fragile materials in construction, such as glass, we may need to use the soft grippers. And the soft materials can also be used to build exoskeleton for the workers to help them to lift the heavy objects in the construction site. So soft materials, exoskeleton made from soft materials are more comfortable and safe for the workers. So here are some related works. The left one is they insert some optical fibers to the silicon, and then they transmit the light through the optical fibers. They use the pattern transmitted by the light to estimate the bending angle or the twisting angle of the silicon. And the right one is a work is published by Professor Yuan. So it is called gel site. And in this work, they use the pattern on the soft material, and they use a change of the pattern to estimate the 3D shape that is pressed on the soft material. So the limitation of the left work is that it oversimplified the problem because it uses like just the angles to estimate the shape, but sometimes it is not enough. We may need the full 3D description of the soft body. And the right one, it may not be easy to be extended to those very large deformations, which is seen in our experiment. So we proposed our approach. Our approach basically learn a two-step sensing function. The first function, H5, maps the self-observation signal to a latent space H. And the second function, F theta, learns to map from the latent space H to a full 3D description P. And it's represent the full 3D shape of the soft robot. So the psi and theta are the learnable parameters. So first, CNN, and we use ResNet here to take the self-observing signals, the images captured by the camera inside soft body to a latent code. And then the F theta maps the latent code to a 3D shape, which is represented by a point cloud. And the ground truth point cloud is collected by a kinetic camera, and we minimize the dissimilarity between the estimated 3D shape and the ground truth 3D shape. After the training, the ground truth 3D shape is not needed, and we can theoretically use the trained model to predict the 3D shape from the self-observing images. So why does it work? Here are some insights. First, we know that there is a definite mapping between the internal view and the 3D shape. It is easy to imagine. If the shape changes, it can be reflected to the images that are captured by the camera inside. Although this mapping could be very highly nonlinear, but we know there's definitely a mapping, so it is deterministic. And another thing is the neural network has a universal approximation ability. No matter how complex, how nonlinear this mapping is, the neural network should have the ability to approximate it. And the third one is we use the neural network to achieve the dimension reduction because the latent code has a finite dimension. So compared with infinite degree of freedom, we compress the deformation to a latent code that is manageable. So here is the data collection system to achieve automatic annotation. The core thing here is the LCM package. So it is a package we used to synchronize those cameras. We have the kinetic camera to collect the ground truth 3D shape, and the internal RGB camera to collect the self-observing images. And they are synchronized by this LCM package so that the input and the ground truth are automatically paired. And this is called automatic data collection and annotation. So here is the experimental results for our reconstruction accuracy. We compared the estimated 3D point cloud with the ground truth 3D point cloud. We used the Hausdorff distance as the evaluation metric. It captures the maximum error between the two surfaces, between the estimated 3D surface and the ground truth 3D surface. We can see that on a 40 centimeter Baymax shaped soft robot, our method reaches millimeter level accuracy. So on the table. And we also do a computational speed analysis. We run the experiment on a Titan XP, like that's a desktop GPU, and also run it on a Jetson Xavier GPU, which is a mobile platform GPU. We can see that our method can reach over 400 Hertz on the desktop GPU and 30 Hertz on the Xavier GPU. So which means that can totally satisfy the need for robotics applications. And in the video, you can show that we compare the predicted 3D shape and the real world ground truth 3D shape. And the figures at the bottom, the images at the bottom shows the internal views from the self-observing cameras. You can see that the predicted 3D shape aligns very well with the ground truth 3D shape. And the predicted 3D shape is it is just predicted from those images without any external 3D information. So then let's move on to the second approach. It's called constraint-based weak supervision. So as I have said, not all ground truths can be collected automatically. Then can we use the constraints between the ground truth outputs as a supervision signal instead of directly using ground truth outputs? Because sometimes the constraints can be automatically collected while the ground truths are not. So that inspires the second idea, constraint-based weak supervision. The example application is robot positioning. We have seen a lot of positioning approaches for robots. For example, we can use GPS, which measures the distance between the receiver and satellites, and then triangulate the coordinates of the receiver. We also see the indoor radio frequency positioning, which share the similar idea with the GPS. Instead of satellites, they measure the distance between those RF transmitters in the room and the receiver to triangulate the coordinates. And also we have those visual localization approaches, which most of them are based on SLAM type of approach. The advantage of visual localization is they have a strong adaptability because they don't require to install the utilities. Because if you use the visual localization to a new environment, it can be adapted to the new environment very quickly. And also it is cost efficient because you don't need to pay extra cost to install those utilities. And the application for robot positioning or localization in construction robotics can be, you can use the robot to draw those layouts on the floor so that the workers can build the components according to the layouts. So actually this is commercialized. There's a company called Dust Robotics provide this type of service. Their robot can take the information from BIM and then draw the layouts on the floor. And if we move it further, we can even directly build the components we need. Without drawing the floor, we can let the robots to directly build what we need. So we can call this 3D mobile 3D printing. And both of these applications requires very accurate localization or positioning function for the robots, because if you want to precisely to build the components or draw the layouts, you need to know where the robot is. So there are some related works. The first type approach is the traditional SLAM, SFM-based method. Those type of methods are based on geometric model. So which means they require a lot of knowledge in geometric computer vision. And there's a lot of hyperparameters to tune, which is not very easy to use for ordinary people. And recent years, there are also one type of approach called supervised pose regression. They directly regress the pose by taking the input images and use the ground truth pose as a supervision signal to train the network. Then the network can directly regress the poses. However, obtaining the ground truth position is not always easy. Sometimes they even rely on the first type of method to obtain the ground truth poses. We will introduce our approach by comparing it with PostNet, the direct pose regression approach. Both PostNet and our approach learns a function f theta that maps the input signal x to a position p. The theta is a learnable parameter. X is the observation at position p. It can be the image. So for most of the time. For PostNet, the ground truth positions are known. So the loss function captures the difference between the estimated poses and the ground truth poses. In our setup, the ground truth positions are not known, so that we calculated the estimated distance between the two estimated positions. And then we use the ground truth distances as the supervision signal. The loss function captures the difference between the ground truth distances and the predicted distances. So the ground truth distances can be automatically collected by the wheel encoder on the robot, while the ground truth positions cannot be automatically collected. So the advantage is that the D is easier to be obtained than P. Then why does it work? Because positions can be solved from Euclidean distance matrix. The right equations show what an Euclidean distance matrix is. The nth row, jth column for Euclidean distance matrix stores the distance between the xi and xj, which are 2 points. So which means it stores the pairwise distances. But note that if we want to solve the positions from the Euclidean distance matrix EDM, we don't necessarily know a complete EDM, because sometimes even if the EDM is incomplete, as in our case, we only know the two consecutive distance. We only know the distance between two consecutive positions. We can also solve the positions. Of course, the positions are subject to a rigid transformation since the absolute coordinate system is not known. And the second reason is the F theta to P is assumed to be a bijection, which basically means we are assuming the environment is static. So this is also valid because that's an assumption for most of the localization positioning approaches. And the third one is the neural network F theta X is differentiable to X, which means a small change in X only causes a small change in the predicted positions. So in our settings, when the robot visits a place that is very close to the place that it visited, then the output position should be close to each other. Although the position could be incorrect, but it should be close. And this implicitly achieves the loop closure function, which is employed by many localization approaches. Although we didn't explicitly enforce the loop closure. So it is automatically achieved by the property of the neural network. So we have some experiments to prove our idea. The first one is we're doing an experiment in a toy example experiment in a numerically simulated environment. The environment is a square range from -1 to 1. And we place some landmarks in the environment, which is illustrated using the black triangles. And the blue dots indicates the trajectory traveled by the simulated robot. The observation is the distances to the landmarks of the robot. And the backbone network is a multi-layer perceptron, MLP, that takes those distance measurements and maps to a 2D position. We can see that our approach reaches comparable results compared to the PostNet, the supervised learning approach. So you can see the numbers in the red box. So it's quite similar to the supervised learning approach, while we don't use any ground truth positions. And the second one is we doing our experiment in a virtualized photorealistic environment. In this time, the input becomes the omnidirectional image. So, and the image is look upwards, which is towards the ceiling. And now the backbone network becomes ResNet, which is a convolutional neural network. So it is used to process the images. Because we only need to predict the positions, therefore we use some rotational invariance techniques. The first is a linear to polar warping, which projects the images from linear coordinate system to the polar coordinate system. And we use a circular padding to improve. So by doing the warping, we convert the rotation invariant to a translational invariant. And then we use circular padding and the data augmentation by rolling the image along the rotation dimension to further strengthen the translational invariance. Then we can achieve the rotational invariance in terms of the fisheye omnidirectional images. So the right videos shows that the input images and the estimated trajectory compared with the ground truth trajectory. It seems that the three trajectories are very close to each other. So which means our method can reach its comparable performance compared to PostNet, which is a green line here, and it is a supervised learning method. And also both of them are close to the ground truth trajectory. So the third experiment is the real world environment experiment. The setup is very similar to the virtualized photorealistic environment. The input is same and the backbone network is also the same. But in the in the simulated environment, we can obtain the ground truth from a simulator. However, here we can only obtain the ground truth using the April tags on the wall. And we use another perspective camera to do the post-estimation using those April tags. So we use the positions estimated by the perspective camera as the ground truth positions. It is interesting to see that our method have better performance than the postnet. So if you look at the dots in the purple boxes, blue dots means the ground truth positions, and the orange dots means estimated positions. In the purple box, our method performs better than the postnet. So we have a hypothesis on this because in the real world experiment, there's an error in the ground truth, so that our method is less subject to overfitting than the supervised learning method that is using the ground truth positions. So then let's move on to the third one, the geometry-based label reduction. So as we have discussed, the previous two methods does not reduce the number of data you need or number of labels you need. So then we use a geometry-based label reduction to directly reduce the required amount of labeled data. And we use convexity as a geometric pair to do the segmentation. And also, this type of approach can be applied to raw point cloud. The example application here is a 3D scene understanding, which basically means we segment the object instances from the 3D point cloud. Here are some works for 3D understanding. So for example, for point RCN, which is used for outdoor point cloud, and point group SGPN, which are used on indoor point cloud. So they all detect the objects in the point cloud. However, they are all supervised learning methods. An application for 3D understanding in civil engineering could be point cloud to BIM. So we all know that now we use the BIM software like Revit. If we want to convert a point cloud to BIM, we need to first import the point cloud to the software, and then we draw those components by hand. So if we can segment those objects, and then we can automatically feed the surface or the shape for each object instead of manually choose them one by one and draw them one by one. So this can improve the automation in the point cloud to BIM process. And what makes an object distinguished from others? Do we really need point-wise labeling for each object? So the answer may be no, because according to the minimum rule and the shortcut rule in psychology and the cognitive science, people tend to decompose a shape into parts at the concave boundary. So that provides us a theory that we may use the convexity to decompose the shape into meaningful parts without using point-wise labeling. For example, if you look at your hand, if you decompose your hand by convexity, it is naturally decomposed into 5 fingers and 1 palm, and you are not using any external point-wise labeling. So there are some related work using convexity to do 3D shape analysis or decomposition. The first two methods are using convexity to do the convex shape decomposition on 3D meshes. And the third one use the convex shape decomposition as a self-supervision signal to train the part segmentation network. So all of these approaches only, so most of them can only be applied to meshes or volumetric model or oriented point cloud. They cannot be directly applied to raw point cloud, but we think raw point cloud is very meaningful since it is directly captured by the sensors, 3D sensors, and without any post-processing. Because they rely on the definition of convexity, in a traditional way. So conventional definition of convexity is if the line segments between the 2 points are out of the shape, then we think this shape is non-convex. So that if you want to decompose a shape into some convex part, those pair of points should be divided into different parts since their connection is not within this shape. However, this is hard to be extended to raw point cloud because in raw point cloud, the line segments between 2 points are always out of the point set since the point set is discretized, but the line segment is continuous. And also, if you want to reconstruct the surface from raw point cloud, it is not very hard. It is still very hard because the surface reconstruction may not always be perfect. Actually, it is still an open problem. So that we proposed our approach. We proposed a distance called concavity-induced distance, CID, which can directly measure how unlikely the 2 points are in a raw point cloud to be on the same convex part. And we don't require other information such as normal or mesh or the volumetric data. What we need is just 3D coordinates. The definition is defined by the maximum distance from the line segments between the two points Pi and Pj to the 3D shape S. So that we can illustrate the red line is the line segment between the P1, P3, and the green line is the farthest distance from the line segment to the shape. And the red one shows a discretized version of it. We discretized the line segment Pi, Pj to a set of points. In this case, the calculation can be more easily calculated on GPU, which is in parallel. So when we have that distance, we can define another CID between 2 groups of points. In this figure, we define a CID between the red group of points and the blue group of points. So it is defined by the average CID between the 2 pairs of between the point pairs from the 2 groups, and averaged by the total numbers of the pairs in the 2 groups. So from the figure, we can see that the CID between the red and the blue groups in the left figure is smaller than the CID between the left and right in the red figure. And it is aligned with our common sense because it is very natural to think that in the left figure, the red and the blue points has larger probability to be in the same convex part. And here's the visualization of CID. We pick 3 points, and then we color code the CID from these selected points to other points in the point cloud. Blue means smaller CID, and the red means larger CID. It seems that we can segment the objects using CID because those points with smaller CID to the selected points is on the same convex part, or the same object, such as on the same wall or on the same surface of the table. So we can perform point cloud deposition via CID. The top branch is doing the supervised learning. So we decompose the point cloud using label propagation. So we first propose some seed points, and then we group the points. We assign each point to a seed points by the closest CID. And then we label the seed points, and then we propagate the label to the other points. And the bottom branch shows a way without using any labeling. So this is called point cloud convex decomposition. And we will discuss this in detail in the following slides. So the first step is a common step. It's called seed point proposal. In these steps, we want to propose some seed points. And those seed points should be well distributed on a different convex part in the shape. So the input is a point cloud S and the number of seed points K. And output is a set of seed points and belongs to the all the points, and also the remaining points, the non-seed points, that is also a subset of all the points. So in the first step, we randomly pick a point, and we put this point to the seed point set and remove it from the non-seed point set. And after each step, we pick the points that has a farthest distance. The distance means CID to the points you selected as seed points. So until the number of seed points reaches K. So we can see that the seed points are well distributed in the scene, because in those areas which are flat, there are less seed points. But in areas which have very complex geometry, there are the seed points becomes denser than those and then the seed points in the flattened areas. So here is the label propagation results by the CID-based approach. So we propagate the instance label and evaluate the instance segmentation using the AP15. So we can see that using the CID-based label propagation, we can achieve a better performance than the SGPN and the point group, which are supervised learning-based approaches. So that the label propagation is very simple. We just group the points by the closest CID to the seed points, and then label the seed points. Then the label is propagated, the semantic label and instance label is propagated to the points that is not seed points. And we can see some visualization of the results. Note that our method does not perform well when the two objects align with each other, such as a wall and the board, because our method does not use RGB information. We only use the XYZ. However, these areas cannot be easily distinguished only by the convexity. But even though our method still reaches very good performance. And then let's talk about the bottom branch. So the first step is the same. You propose the seed points and you group the points using the seed points. After that, you don't have the labels to propagate, but now you have a set of input groups and a set of, so that you calculated the group-wise CID between all pairs of groups. After that, you merge the two groups, which has smallest CID, until the number of iterations reaches a predefined number T. You can see that after several iterations, those convex segments can be separated in the scene, such as the ceilings, such as the floors, the walls, the top of the table, the leg of the table, and the seat and the back of the chair. So to evaluate this, we define two evaluation metrics, the compactness and the purity. The compactness is used to define so how compact your group is. If you have too many groups, then it is not very compact. It is defined by the ground truth number of objects divided by the final number of groups after merging. Another metric is the purity. It is defined by how pure each group is. Means that if the group contains only the points from the only one object, then it is good. It has higher purity. The compactness and purity is a complex here. Usually higher purity means less compactness. We compare our method with the baseline method at the same level of compactness. It is shown that our method has a higher purity than the baseline method at the same compactness by a large margin. Note that the baseline method cannot directly be used on raw point cloud without the oriented normals, so that before applying the baseline method, we estimated the normals and oriented normals for the point cloud. So here is the visualization of our method and compared it with the baseline method. it is shown that our method can keep those very large objects, such as the walls. However, the baseline method tends to decompose it into several different parts, which means that our method can preserve those objects better than the baseline method. So after I introduce this three-type approach, let me review the whole dissertation. So we want to put it into a big picture. If we say that the fully automated construction is a holy grail, then we need the support from many disciplinary, for example, as material science, control science, and definitely we need the approaches from machine learning in construction robotics. And our approach, this dissertation proposes three-type approach. The first is automatic data annotation. And based on that, we propose constraint-based weak supervision. And the third one is the geometric-based label reduction. And one is on the top of the previous one. Those three types of approaches together contribute to the label efficient learning to improve the machine learning in construction robotics, thus make a small contribution towards the final goal, fully automated construction. So the limitation of this of the approaches we proposed includes, first is the automatic data collection system may not be perfect. It sometimes is subject to those incomplete information. For example, the 3D point cloud you collected may be subject to self-occlusion, so that you cannot get the full 3D, the real full 3D ground truth. And another is, we find that in the constraint-based weak supervision, it does not always work, because sometimes your training set can give you a trivial solution that satisfies the constraints, but it is far from the ground truth position. And the conditions under which the constraint-based weak supervision works still needs to be explored. The third one is the speed for CID-based approach is very slow. It is because there are many discretization and sometimes the max mean process can slow down the calculation for CID approach by a large margin. So the future work may have the following directions. The first is we can develop algorithm that is suitable for incomplete automatic data collection, which means even if we don't get access to the ground truth, complete ground truth 3D shape, we can make a prediction to the 3D shape. This may include some semi-supervised learning techniques. And also, we want to study the condition under which the constraint-based weak supervision is valid. Therefore, it can guide us to collect data more wisely. And the third one is we can accelerate the computation of CID, maybe by further approximation or some other techniques. Another way to accelerate it is we can combine the CID-based approach with self-supervised learning. So if we use the CID-based segmentation as a self-supervised learning signal, and then we can use a network to learn this kind of decomposition. So after the network is trained, we do not need to calculate the CID like every time. So this is another way to accelerate the CID-based approach. So thank you for listening. I really appreciate you attending my defense of dissertation, and feel free to ask me any questions.
Thank you.